Okay, stop, Matt. Just use your words, okay? This will be One Piece chapter 937 review titled Gyukimaru of the Bandit Bridge. But more importantly, this is a chapter that really reveals a lot of stuff. I mean, it doesn't like directly come out and say it, but it was one of those chapters I was reading this morning and I was like, holy crap, that makes sense now, that makes sense now, that makes sense now, which means that'll probably lead to this and that. You know, this was the reason I went to Opie University for 6 years and got my freaking master's in One Pieceology. Do you have a master's in One Pieceology? Because I do, and it's going to come in handy right here. Woo, boy. And you know what? It's not even as intense as the other chapters we've gotten. Like, we don't get any bathhouse scenes in this chapter. There's not a one, which is sad, but it's okay because it gets made up for a lot of stuff. We cut over to see what's going on with Choppa and Big Mom very briefly. Then we cut over to the Udon prison to see what's going on with Luffy, also very briefly, before the rest of the chapter just focuses on Zorro fighting that Benkei of the 7 weapons looking dude from last chapter, whose name is now reviewed to be Gyukimaru. That's one cool thing about the chapter. Just Gyukimaru is a badass name. Kind of reminds me of Naruto because the 8 Tails was named Gyuki. Just a fun word to say in Japanese. Gyuki. Alright, so let's just dive into it and I'll give you my theories and stuff as we go about it, but it's a trippy one once you really look into this. Okay, so we start off the chapter over at the border between Curry and Udon. Remember, Big Mom and Chopper and Okiku and you know, Momo's there and Tama's there, and they're all heading to the Udon prison to try to save Luffy, okay? But it's going to be a very long journey. They're riding around on one of those giant land crocodile shark things that Jack had. Big Mom knocked it into submission, and they're just riding them down to the through the wastelands into Udon. So they're on the border, so they're getting there, but it's still going to be a little while before they actually reach the prison proper. And so basically, Big Mom is just talking about this thing called Oshiruko. And if you don't know what Oshiruko is, it's like a traditional Japanese red bean like soup. It's like a sweet kind of thing, and so obviously Big Mom is just taken away by it. Tama loves it too. She's like, oh, I thought my cheeks would pop off for real once I, you know, had that delicious red bean soup. Honestly, I pulled up some pictures of it. It doesn't really look all that delicious, but keep in mind, these people in Wano have been starving for pretty much their entire lives, like Tama has, essentially. So, yeah, you look at this, this would probably be the equivalent of, like, your favorite meal. Something just so delicious they couldn't even fathom, right? I'm sure their taste buds would just explode from eating this stuff. And so I guess what happened was Chopper lied to Big Mom, saying that, you know, oh, it's kind of like something you do with a child when you're on a long car ride. You have to kind of make it worth their while so they don't complain the entire ride there. And it's like, well, you know, it's gonna be a while until we get to Disneyland, kids, but when we get there, there'll be a giant chocolate cake. Giant chocolate cake! Yeah, if you only have to be good. I'm like, okay. So that's kind of what Chopper did to Big Mom, which is hilarious considering she's one of the 4 emperors of the ocean, and Chopper's just like, Big Mom, if you promise to be good. Well, she didn't call her Big Mom. I was like, oh, Lynn, if you promise to be good, there'll be a giant bowl of delicious red bean paste when we get to the Udon prison. And Big Mom's like, yummy. He probably had to say that because last time we saw them, Big Mom was kind of eyeing up Chopper, sort of like, it's gonna be a long way to this prison, isn't it? You know, kind of looking at him like he's backup food, and so Chopper had to say something, and he's like, yeah, red bean paste, huge, delicious, very, very tasty meal, gonna be at the prison. And so Chopper, though, now, he's really starting to realize what he said. He probably said it as just a joke or like as a natural defense thing, trying to get her off, you know, his back, really, quite literally, like spitfiring Chopper's back. That's, but now he's realizing he's sitting there, like, driving the crocodile, and his mouth is all like squiggly. He's like, what happens if she goes on another hunger rampage and she gets her memory back and she wrecks all of Wano? Luffy's gonna be mad at me. So that's a legitimate concern. I'm not gonna say, Chopper, oh, don't worry about it, man. You have nothing to worry about. No, that is a legitimate concern, because if she gets all hyped up, I mean, this exact same thing happened with the wedding cake. She was all pumped and ready for the Okay, I never want to think about Big Mom being pumped and ready for anything, but in this case, all right, fine. Context, guys, context. She was pumped and excited for the wedding cake, and then she didn't get it, and that led into like a 30-chapter mini arc where she only basically said 2 words the entire time. So if they show up to this prison and this delicious dessert is not there, I mean, even if she doesn't get her memories back, it still wouldn't be good, because she could still go into her hunger pangs. She just wouldn't remember why she's doing it, but she would still do it, and that would still lead into a mindless rampage, right? So anyway, they're getting closer to the Udon prison. I'm assuming that this is all going to collate together, like when Raizo, decides to make his grand escape with Kawamatsu and Luffy and Old Man Hyo. That'll be like at the same time that this group arrives at the prison as sort of like their getaway car, and then Big Mom can always like, you stay away from them, boom, and then knock away anybody that's chasing them, even Queen. I mean, that would be kind of funny, like Queen is chasing after them and then Big Mom comes out of nowhere and like swings Napoleon and just knocks Queen down and they manage to get away. That I think would make, I would actually be more okay with that than Luffy just straight up like flooring Queen and then they just get out of there. I mean, he does have a higher bounty than Queen, we found out that about him, but I mean, bounty doesn't always mean just straight power, and I don't want Queen to be defeated this early on in the arc, really, even though we're already on like probably halfway through Act 2 or something like that, or maybe like 1/4 of the way through Act 2. I don't know how Oda's going to structure them, but yeah, I don't want Queen to go out quite yet. So with that being said, now we do cut over to the Udon prison properly, back into the Sumo Inferno, where Luffy's going like, I don't know, 55-0, like nobody's stopping him. So up until this point, they were basically just sending in the riffraff of the Beast Pirates at Luffy and Hyo, and those are called the Pleasures. You might remember them back from Zou. The Pleasures, from what we see, are not smile users in any way. They're really just sadistic buff dudes that wave swords around. It's like, come on guys, let's go show them what for. That kind of crap. So Luffy took those guys out, no problem, and he's not even concerned with the arena or the collar that's going to trigger and, just slice off his, and by the way, people have been saying, like, Luffy's now, he has his devil fruit powers back, right? He's made of rubber. Couldn't Luffy just, because it'll only go off if he exits the arena, so couldn't he just, like, boing! Kind of the same thing he did back during Water 7. Remember when Kaku took those, like, spike, like, tent post things and just threw them at Luffy and Paulie and pinned them to the ground instead of killing them? I never really understood why they didn't just kill them, but whatever, it is okay. And Luffy just slowly, I mean, it took him a little while to do it, but he had to just kind of like, boing! Boing! If you turn off the video and you just listen to my voice, this could make for some very comedic effects. Come on, get in out of there! Boing! That's how he got out of that thing. So, he's not concerned about that, though. He still has the collar on. He's just taking this time, once again, to train. Because he's like, these guys are not a threat to me at all, so I could just use them as like, oh yeah, send in the next wave, giant balloon dude. I was trying to get that technique right last time, but it failed. Let me get another shot. And he's like, send in the next wave! Ho, ho, ho. Boing! And then, they get dropped. It's like, it's still not what I want. Come on, send in next wave. Come on, let's keep this moving. Okay. So, all the Pleasures have been defeated, right? And this actually brings up first thing that's rather interesting about this chapter. Luffy remarks about something that Rayleigh taught him way back during their early training in Ruskina. In fact, we actually saw it. It was right before the time skip happened. I don't know if it might have actually been the chapter of like when the time skip begins, when Luffy arrives with Rayleigh on Ruskina. And remember, Rayleigh was demonstrating the 3 types of Haki to us, the fandom, for the very first time. So he demonstrates observation by just avoiding that giant elephant. And when he demonstrates armament with the elephant, it's a little bit different than the way that armament has been shown by Luffy and Zorro and everybody since then, okay? Remember, the elephant went to go like stomp on Rayleigh, and all Rayleigh had to do is just raise up his hand, and the elephant's foot, it didn't like hit Rayleigh's hand and then get hurt. It like got repelled. It was like he couldn't even get close to Rayleigh's hand, and then just boosh, just got blasted backwards. And Luffy mentions here, that Haki that Rayleigh displayed the first time we saw him use all three on Ruskaina, that was some crazy high-level Haki. That wasn't the same kind of stuff Luffy's been using up until now with, like, you know, armament, vulcanization, you know, and, like, making his arm go black and then punching people out. No, he was doing something else that was way higher level. So that's a good thing. So that hints, and also something we're going to get from Zorro later in this chapter that's also really fun, involving Shusui. This arc is going to be more focused on armament, just like, you know, Totland was focused on Luffy honing more observation skills with his fight with Katakuri. Yeah, I think this chapter pretty much confirms at this point armament is going to be our main focus here, waiting to see how Luffy's going to find out the higher levels of armament, same way he found out about the higher levels of observation. Here's something else to bring up. Do you guys remember how before the time skip we didn't really get to see those that vulcanization hardening ability? You know, like after the time skip, the characters were all busting out black blades and their hands were going black and everything. I always assumed that was because, you know, we, the fandom, didn't know really much about Haki, but then after the time skip we did, and so Oda started visually depicting it as just like, oh, now we know what this is. But that doesn't necessarily mean that every single attack involving Armament Haki uses the vulcanization technique. Because when Luffy first uses it, you know, when the full name of the technique is like, let's say he uses Elephant Gun. Luffy is first like gear third, you know, increases the size of his arm, and then he's like, you know, hardening, and then it goes black with armament, and then he's like, you know, Elephant Gun, and that's the full name of the attack. It's like gear third, hardening, or vulcanization, depending on the translation, and then the actual name of the technique, Elephant Gun, all right? So there might be higher level versions of armament where you don't even need to bother with the hardening or anything. You just have to just put out your arm, and then boom, you just repel people coming at you. And this is probably not just with your arms. Like, you can maybe just tense up your body, sort of like Tekkai, and then every attack that gets sent flying at you, let's say a bunch of people take out arrows, and they start firing bullets at you, and you just collect yourself, calm your mind, and then just whoosh, and then boom, and everything doesn't even connect to your skin. It just bounces off. I guess you could say that's similar to Conquerors, because Conquerors has a similar effect. But yeah, the thing that Rayleigh did, very different from what we've seen so far. Now, Luffy also does name drop Rayleigh. He was like, the thing that Rayleigh did with that elephant, it was way more gentle than what I have to do to take out these guys, because he's probably trying to mimic him. Remember, Luffy did train with Rayleigh for 1.5 years on Ruskaina, but he spent most of that time just learning the basics of Haki. So I think now Luffy is like, okay, I've trained with Haki on Ruskaina, and now I have some practical applications of it, because he's fought against a bunch of enemies in the New World, you know, through Fishman Island and Punk Hazard and Dressrosa. I think Luffy's starting to get to the point where he's like, okay, I think I can actually start to work on those techniques that Rayleigh showed me. You know, like I can actually start taking it to the higher level. I trained with it, and now I can see how I can actually use it in real combat, which is something he couldn't do on Ruskaina. I mean, he fought against the giant animals, but there's a difference between brawling with a giant bear on Ruskaina and actually fighting it out with Doflamingo. You know what I mean? Like, there's just more experience with Dofi. So now he's like, I got to start working on my Haki even more, especially I got those cuffs off now. So he was working on his physical strength, and now he's working on his armament. I don't know how much longer Luffy's going to be in the prison, but Oda's doing a pretty good job at like, all right, yeah, he is getting stronger, and it's following a certain track of how he's doing it. Like, okay, boosted his physical stats, now he's working on armament. He already worked on observations, so now we're going to see where this is going here. Now, when he mentions Rayleigh, Hyo is kind of off to the side, and he's just like, Hyo's not really doing anything. He's not really a help in this battle, but it's okay, man, just chill out. And Hyo's like, Rayleigh? Luffy, what are you into? So, I don't know if this means that Hyo met Rayleigh at some point. I mean, if he would have, I mean, it would have made sense. He was the leader of the Yakuza 20 plus years ago, and I mean, if Roger's crew, I mean, they did arrive at Wano at some point, they would have met, so it makes sense. But also keep in mind, Rayleigh is like one of the most well-known people in the entire world. So someone name-dropping Rayleigh out of nowhere and being like, what the hell are you doing with the Dark King? That's not something that's unusual, but I'm gonna just throw out there right now, considering with everything else happening in this chapter. Yeah, old man Hyo might have had some connection to Rayleigh. They might have, maybe not some super deep connection, but they might have met. Maybe they clashed blades when they were back in Wano like 20-something years ago. Maybe something like that. All right, so turns out that Oshiruko, the red bean paste that Chopper lied about, yeah, It actually is in the prison, and that's the funny thing. That's the joke that Oda had, where people are asking Queen, "Oh, Queen, give me some of that red bean soup," and you know, Queen's like, "Get away! This is mine. I brought tons of it to this prison, and I'm the only one allowed to have it." I reiterate, Oshiruko is my favorite dessert, and I have a lot of it here, but it's only for me. And I'm sure this will not come back to affect me in any negative way, shape, or form in the immediate future. Give me another bowl, giant scorpion man. Thank you. No. So, I think we know where that's gonna go. If anything else, you know, you could just say, "Big Mom, that guy has all the Oshiruko." I'm like, okay, bam, and then she takes all of it. So, okay, at least we won't worry about Big Mom going on an immediate hunger pang when she gets to the prison. Okay, Chopper, you did good. He could have said anything else. He could have lied and said any other food stuff. He could have said, "Oh, don't worry, Big Mom, when we get there's a lot of onigiri, or there's a lot of karage." Karage is Japanese fried chicken. I'd be like, and then like they didn't have it, but he just happened to pick the one thing that was Queen's favorite meal. So okay, that's the joke. But anyway, Luffy just strikes an epic pose as Queen doesn't even care that Luffy knocked out all the pleasures. He's just wiping his face. He's just, "Oh, that was a good meal." And Luffy's like, "All right, bring it on." He's like, "Okay, you heard the man, bring him on." Also, some of the other headliners, like the Scorpion dude, were like, let me at him, Queen." And Queen's like, "Nah, I want to make this actually more entertaining. All right, he took out all of the fodder. Send out some more." Listen, I don't play a lot of like MMOs or anything like that, but the only one I really played, the only one I was really ever addicted to was RuneScape. Back in the day, RuneScape, or like 2007 kind of RuneScape, and that Teztok Jad boss fight, you know, where they just send wave after wave after wave of some of the most annoying monsters in the entire game, and I couldn't even get halfway through that freaking onslaught. It was just a gauntlet. So yeah, I'm having flashbacks to that. So Luffy's taken out all of the fodder, so we're probably gonna move on to some low tier smile users, some gifters. If he beats the gifters, they might start sending in like 5 headliners at once, and after that 10 headliners at once, and then after that Queen steps in along with flanked by 20 headliners or something. I don't know how many headliners there are, but we'll find out. All right, so now we cut back over to the Bandit Bridge that that's the name of the place that, you know, Zorro ran into the bandit guy, who his title is actually Bandit Warrior Monk Gyukimaru. That makes sense because the Benkei guy we mentioned wasn't actually a samurai, he was a monk that turned into like this weapon collector, all right? So from historical context, this makes sense, he's more of a monk. He also doesn't fight with the same kind of code of honor as samurai do, because many times in this chapter, when Zorro is kind of distracted or fighting somebody else, this dude, Gyukimaru, will try to take an attack of opportunity at Zorro's back, which isn't a very honorable thing to do. So anyway, I guess Zorro did try to explain as best as he could that he did run into Ryuma, like they have met, but as you can imagine, and as I figured from the last chapter, it didn't go over too well, because the guy is just like, "How could you have met Ryuma?" And Zorro is like, "Yeah, well, he did kind of have the soul of a talking skeleton at the time, but it really was Ryuma." But Zorro doesn't even really seem all that concerned about it. He doesn't seem to be like, "Come on, you gotta believe me, man." He's just kind of like, "Hey, listen, I told you the story. You can believe me or not. I don't really care, but I need 3 swords." It's kind of my thing, and I don't know if I'm not good at directions, but I can count pretty well, and 1, 2. Yeah, I'm 1 short, so you can believe my story or not, but I'm gonna go take Shusui back, because I really kind of like that sword, and it just feels nice having 3 of them on my belt, you know what I mean? So, Zorro doesn't really care whether or not Gyukimaru believes the story. He's just like, how about we do it this way? We fight, I beat the crap out of you, I go and I take my sword back. How about we just do that and call it even? So they start clashing. Which, by the way, I didn't even know about this. I found out about this through Artor's analysis. But the whole bridge thing, that's also something from an historical context or from an old painting where that Benkei dude is fighting against somebody on top of a bridge, and it looks exactly the same as what Zorro's doing here. So that's the origin of that. So thank you, Oda. But anyway, while they're clashing, we're getting a little bit more of the lore, the backstory of Wano and Ryuma and how they're connected. Okay, so Gyukimaru is talking about how back in the day, Wano, this was hundreds of years ago, Wano was referred to as the Golden Country or the Golden Land. I'm having Legend of Zelda Link to the Past, flashbacks right now, but he's like, this place was regarded as like there were so many natural resources here. There might have been actual gold here on top of the Sea Prism Stone, just the lush greenery and it's just all that stuff here. People wanted it. Pirates, the Marines, and the government, everybody. And then they started going to Wano, and the person that really showed them the strength of the samurai, like the samurai are here and we are protecting our homeland, that was Ryuma. So you know how I've always been talking about how Ryuma is like the national hero of Wano? No, he was even one step beyond that. He was like God level to Wano citizens. He is like an historical figure that literally defended their land from cruel oppression by the world government. Like, that's the reason the Marines and the government don't screw with Wano. It's like it all started with Ryuma. I can imagine, because Ryuma lived 400 years ago, I think. I can imagine 400 years ago, the government sending all these Marine battleships and pirates pillaging the land, and then Ryuma, he takes his Shusui and he rallies together a bunch of the strongest samurai and he leads the charge, takes out his sword, is like, we shall not give them our homeland this day! Wano country for life! Banzai! And he charges in and just starts slicing up all of the Marines and the government ships and the pirates. Like, they made a message, like, you do not mess with this land. We don't want anything to do with your world government. We don't want anything to do with this. We can protect ourselves. This is our country. Alright, so that is the status Ryuma has, which makes everything kind of make more sense now, why people were losing their crap over Shusui. I always just put Ryuma in the same category of just like, oh yeah, he was a really strong samurai that lived a few hundred years ago. Of course, Wano culture is essentially Japanese culture, and the Japanese very honorable to their ancestors and everything like that. So I just assumed it was a deal like that, but no, he was probably the single most important samurai in all of Wano history, period. That was Ryuma. So that makes more sense why they're like, oh no, it was my duty to, take back Shusui and return it to its tomb. Because imagine after his corpse and his sword were stolen by Moria and Hogback, 12 years ago, I can imagine there was like a month of mourning in the country where people were like genuinely like crying and bawling in the streets because their god figure had their stuff, like had their tomb defiled. Someone had the temerity to come into our land and steal our national hero's body. Also makes the whole Zorro Ryuma fight a little bit more epic now if he was actually alive at the time, like that would have been pretty cool. So that's important. But something else that gets brought up again is his dragon slaying. That dragon, I love you, Oda. I love you, man. The Tenryubito have this connection with dragons. Their emblem is the hoof of the celestial dragon. We know that dragons have existed in One Piece a long time ago. They're not around a lot now. We have mythical zones like Kaido. We have the dragons that were artificially created on Punk Hazard, but we don't see dragons just flying around all over the place, right? What if, and I talked about this in a video, but just to give you the Cliffs Notes version, what if back in the day, 900 years ago, the Tenryubito, the original Tenryubito, had dragons, like an actual dragon fighting force, and then just over the years they died off, or Game of Thrones, or whatever happened, they inbred and they didn't have dragons anymore. That would explain why the Punk Hazard, why Vegapunk was working in dragon developing research. That would explain their emblem. Like they really want dragons to exist again so they can really enact their true power over the world. Also, flying machines and stuff don't exist in One Piece. The world government makes it very clear that, that stuff, I'm sure they even lock it down. Like, if anybody were to try to invent a airplane or something, they would shut it down because they used to have the power of the air. They know how dominating that can be, and they don't have it anymore, so that's why they can't let anybody else have it either, okay? So what if 400 years ago, that dragon Ryuma slayed, that wasn't just like, oh, there's a dragon attacking our land, we have to cut it down. That was a Tenryubito's dragon. That was a dragon sent by the world nobles, or maybe a world noble rode around on it to kind of subjugate Wano. Like, these samurai wiped out all of our battleships. They wiped out all of our government ships. They're repelling every force. We only have one option left. Send in the dragon to show them who's boss. And then Ryuma, like a freaking baller, just shing! Oh! Yeah, and then after that, at that point, the Tenryubito realized, okay, woo, alright, well, you guys have fun with your country. We'll leave you alone. That's what happened. We're probably going to have a flashback at some point with that dragon. Now, the dragon appeared in Monsters, and it's probably going to be the same basic scene with him slicing it down, but I'm sure Oda's going to touch it up a little bit, have it make more sense in the context of One Piece. Because there were some things in Monsters, like there was a character in Monsters that looked exactly like Mihawk, basically, so I don't know if he's going to include that character or not. But, referencing Mihawk and referencing Yoru, that's the next big thing to talk about, the Black Blades. Alright, so, what happened next is that while telling him all of this lore, Gyukimaru also mentions the Shusui, and he mentions how it's a black blade. And he says that Ryuma fought countless battles with that sword by his side, and over the years of him fighting, it grew into the black blade that we see today. And Zorro is kind of clashing with him, and he gets distracted, and he's like, grew? You mean implying that it wasn't always this color? I think you know where I'm going with this. And he even stops and he's like, actually, that has been bothering. Like, it's something Zorro has thought about before, probably ever since Mihawk told him, like, all blades can become black blades. And then Zorro probably started thinking, like, wait a second. I already have a blade that's always black. Maybe Zorro, up until that point, just assumed, like, oh, it was just, you know, it's just maybe a different kind of metal that was used to make it. But then after Mihawk told him, you know, all blades can become black blades, and after he started to learn Armament Haki, he's just like, wait a second. That's weird. And this Shusui always did feel a little weirder than his other blades. Like when he first used it against Oars, it's like it's a lot heavier, and he used his 108 caliber Phoenix, and like the blast wave from Shusui was so powerful it sucked in the other two into this giant attack. Alright? So, yeah, I'm gonna call this, there was a theory that, I mean, I talked about it, but a lot of other people talked about it. I'm not the only one that talked about it, but there was a theory that, yeah, the sword Yoru and Shusui, they're not black blades because they're made out of a special metal. They started out as regular blades, and just over the years of constantly having Armament Haki, you know, pumped into them by their users, the metal itself turned black and, you know, exhibited some of their qualities. Even without the user putting armament into them, it always has this kind of power to it. Alright, so that theory's been out for a while now. I really like it, so I'm just going to go with that, because that seems to be what's implying here. It makes sense given that Shusui and Yoru are the two black blades in the series, so that there's a connection between both of them there. But hey, I like that. I like that idea. I was on the fence about it for a little while. I was like, is it something like that? Maybe it is just a special metal, but no, it's that. So Ryuma fought countless battles with his blades, and eventually they just got armament poured into them. Now, what about Zorro? Because Zorro just learned Haki, and he's been in a few fights, but he hasn't been in anything on close to the number of Mihawk or Ryuma. We still don't know how old Ryuma was when he died naturally. Okay, he might have been well into his 50s or 60s by the time he died, and you know he was fighting his entire life. So Zorro, it's probably going to be quite a while until Zorro, you know, exudes enough armament into his Wano or his Katetsu blade until it turns black. But yeah, that would actually be a cool, like, you know, complementary color thing where you have a white blade, you know, the path to harmony, Wado Ichimonji, but then the blade is stained black. That would be really cool in comparison, right? So yeah, that's the case there. So they continue fighting, but remember, Zorro's a little distracted by that, but he's just like, you're wide open, shing, and he starts kind of attacking with the Naginata, and Zorro's like, can't you see I'm trying to think here? I'm kind of distracted. Can you give me this is anime, man. Can't you give me 5 seconds to have an inner monologue? And Yukimaru is just like, you know, victories are had at moments of hesitation. Oh. And so Zoro's like, fine, whatever. But then he starts saying, like, hey, when you said Black Blade, were you talking about, and then we stop because we hear a scream in the background and we see a woman running with Toko. Remember, Toko is the smiling girl from the Red Light District. We see another woman who is probably either a courtesan or a geisha, probably a courtesan, and is totally not Komurasaki. I cannot tell you all the different ways on how this woman is not Komurasaki. She's just not, you know? It's probably Komurasaki. We don't find out her name. Some random woman just running up to Zorro and is being chased after and trying to protect Toko with her life. And, you know, you figure if she was just a random character we don't even care about, Oda would have just given her name right here. Like, this is a courtesan from the Red Light District, and her name is Naruko. I don't freaking know. Whatever, who cares? I'm pretty sure this is Komurasaki. But she's running with Toko, and she's fleeing for her life. She's screaming. She's panting from running so much. Her arm is bleeding. I think her leg is bleeding, and she's hobbling. And she's like, please help me! And Zoro's looking over, and he's like, what the hell? And then so he sees that she's bleeding, and he's like, oh, okay, so this is serious. And then we find out the person that is chasing her is actually Kamazo. He's the scythe wielder from the capital. He's the serial killer that's going around slicing everybody down. We originally thought it might have been Kawamatsu, because Kamazo, Kawamatsu, maybe it's similar, but no, it's actually a completely different character. And this guy, he doesn't seem to be like an ally. This guy is actually a hired mercenary for Orochi himself that's merely masquerading as a serial killer. So what happens is Orochi, like, gives him the orders, like, I want these guys taken care of. And then Kamazo goes out into the capital with his 2 giant scythe blades as sickles and just starts cutting people down. And then later on in the news, it's like, oh, another slaying last night, you know, in this district or whatever. But it was actually Orochi that orchestrated everything. So Kamazo is an enemy. He also has a very creepy laughter style. It's fa 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 fa. So now imagine that. You're walking home late at night. It's kind of foggy. You're like, you just hear that in the distance, and it keeps getting louder and louder as the shadowy figure with this giant scythe blade emerges, like freaking Pyramid Head from Silent Hill. You know, that would be a great way to end out your existence, isn't it? Well, anyway, he knows who Zorro is, or rather Zorro Juro. He's like, you're Zorro Juro, a criminal from the capital. Why did you come to the aid of this woman and child? So, yeah, the woman, Komurasaki, talks back to this Kamazo dude, you know, like, you're not really who you say you are. You're hired by Orochi. And Kamazo's like, how dare you? You use the Shogun's real name without any honorific or anything? Who are you? So I think that's pretty much slapping you right in the face right there. She's saving Toko. She's covered up trying to hide her identity. And she's referring to the Shogun without any honorific, like she doesn't respect him or something. Yeah, it's Komurasaki. So anyway, he's like, who are you, lady? But anyway, he doesn't really care about that. He instead focuses on Zorro. There is a scene where the lady is just like, samurai, Zorro Juro, if you help me, I'll give you anything. And Zorro's a nice guy. He's kind of like, well, yeah, I'm not about to just let a woman and a child get defeated by this giant sickle dude. I'm not a monster. Yeah, I'll protect you, but, you know, I could go for a nice dinner and some good glug of sake right now. I've been running around all over the freaking country. It's cold out here, man. So, yeah, how about we do this? How about I save you, cut open this sickle guy, take care of this giant bandit monk dude, run over to a tomb of your national god, rip it, take my sword back, and then, yeah, we'll go out for dinner and have some sake, hang out for drinks. It'll be a fun time. So Zorro starts fighting against Kamazo, but as you can figure, he also has Gyukimaru back there, who keeps also like, once again, he's fighting with somebody else. His back is turned, and then, you know, Gyukimaru's trying to attack him with the Naginata, so he doesn't have the same sense of honor that Zorro does or the other samurai. He's just like, you're wide open! You're wide open! He's like, what? You freaking stop with that crap! I'm trying to fight 2 people at once here! And as you can imagine, Kamazo's got those 2 giant scythes. He eventually manages to get a hit off on Zorro. He just slams it right here, right lower than his shoulder. It just dives right into his body and it cuts him. And it looks pretty painful, and all the woman and Toko, they're freaking out. Of course, Toko smiles all the time, so she's like, oh no, Zorro, no! Oh man, I being chased by a giant scythe-wielding serial killer. I'm gonna have nightmares of this for the rest of my life. So anyway, he gets sliced, but it was the scene that's great where he tries to pull out the blade, and I say this phrase a lot. I need to figure out a way to make this into a t-shirt next or something, but, you know, freaking Zorro's just kind of like tenses up his muscles so he can't pull it out because he's so buff. It's just like, hey, guess what? What? Why can't I pull out my scythe? Because I work out. And he talks him down. And Zorro literally, he has Katetsu in one hand, he has his Ichimonji in the other. He takes his freaking teeth, grabs the scythe blade, rips it out of his flesh, Hakis up all three weapons, and uses Purgatory Onigiri on Kamazo. Just boom! And then that's how the chapter ends. Haki's up two of his swords, plus a weapon he's never even used before, as a substitute for Shusui, and just slices the dude down. That is awesome! That is great! Oh, that was a fun chapter, man. I love that. You know how epic this chapter was? Normally, my routine is I wake up in the morning, I read the One Piece chapter, then I read, usually it goes One Piece, then Dr. Stone, then My Hero Academia, then The Promised Neverland, and then Black Clover is usually last. That's my order I usually read them in. But today I read this chapter of One Piece and I'm like, I need to get my ass moving. I slept in usually a little longer than I usually do. I usually like to wake up around 8:30. I woke up around 9:30 this morning and I'm like, I need to get moving. I need to do this review right now. This has to get done. This has to get screw Dr. Stone. I don't even know what's going on with Dr. Stone right now. They might have solved the whole conundrum with the, stone petrification ray. I'll figure that out later when I go read it, but this has to take precedent right now, you know what I mean? We find out about Shusui and the Black Blades having a connection. We find out about Luffy learning and training about armament, higher levels of armament. We found out about Ryuma's backstory and the lore connecting Wano. That's why it's an isolated nation. It started 400 years ago when he fought back against the government. That dragon probably was a symbol of the Tenryubito that freaking Ryuma cut down, so that lends credence to believe the whole dragon obsession thing. There's so much crap in this chapter, and it's really not all that long or anything, and we cap it all off with the crescendo of Zorro ripping out a freaking sickle with his teeth, and then Armament Hakiing it up and slicing down Kamazo. And Komurasaki is alive too, so that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. So good for her, though. I'm glad she's not dead, I guess. All right, so we'll find out probably what's going on with her next chapter. I don't know what's going to go on with the Gyukimaru guy. I don't know if after slicing Kamazo down, maybe the Gyukimaru is going to be there like, maybe you, crap, maybe you are a good swordsman and you actually did meet Ryuma. I don't know if I'm going to want to fight you anymore. Or maybe Komurasaki knows Gyukimaru. Here's the thing to mention. She was running towards the northern graveyard for a reason. Like, let's assume that they, were in the flower capital, and then Kamazo attacked them, and then she grabbed Otoko, and she ran out of the capital trying to get help. Why would she run to Ringo, which is like this snowy place where there's like nobody around, unless she knew somebody there that could help her? So maybe Komurasaki knows Gyukimaru, and then they can kind of like come to an understanding like, no, this is Zorro, he helped me, blah, blah, blah. And then maybe they need to solve the conundrum of Shusui eventually. Like, there needs to be, like, something that tells them that Shusui belongs in the hands of Zorro, because otherwise they're not just going to let him have it. You know what I mean? Like, even if Komurasaki talks to Gyukimaru and gets him to be like, all right, well, I understand he's our ally, but I'm not giving him that sword. It doesn't belong to him. And Zorro's like, dude, I told you to move aside. I'm gonna go grab it, and then they start fighting again. So that needs to be solved soon. And Oda is building to that. Oda is definitely building that we're gonna get some sort of flashback involving Ryuma. That's gonna happen pretty soon. So I'm really pumped for that. Yeah, a lot of cool crap in this chapter. Even Kamazo himself. I mean, honestly, Kamazo kind of reminds me of like a character that would appear at the beginning of a manga, like this really scary mummy-looking dude. He's like, I'm I'm a hired assassin. Like, you know that assassin that appeared at the very beginning of Kingdom? That's who he kind of reminds me of. Not really in appearance, but just in terms of, like, personality and aesthetic. Like, I'm this really scary dude that's gonna come cut you down, and he just gets taken out by the main character in the first chapter. But, you know, in terms of appearance, he uses the giant scythe blades, and I guess Zorro is like, I'm gonna take this scythe blade. I'm not used to it, but I guess it's better than nothing, right? I don't know, but we'll see. And I don't even know if Kamazo is down for good, because Zorro, I don't think Zorro is really the kind of guy that's against, you know, straight up capping somebody, especially in this circumstance. But I don't think he's dead yet, but he's on the ground bleeding, and he got hit with Purgatory Onigiri, so he's probably not getting up after this, but he might still be alive. So, yeah, that's the case there. Now we only have to worry about Ox 3 Boy, who I'm assuming is Denjiro, because that's the other mysterious person of the capital we didn't know about. So I'm assuming Ox 3 Boy is Denjiro. So, yeah, let me know what you guys think below about red bean soup, and also about the Shusui and the Legend of Ryuma and the dragon, and what's going to go on with Armament Haki in this arc. We might get to the point where, you know, they can start fighting without even, like, maybe we get to a level of Haki where you swing your sword and the thing you're trying to cut gets cut before you even swing your sword. I don't know if there's like a next level of this, how it's going to operate, but we'll see. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. This will be Tekking101 signing out.